Hi there, it's Donovan, and welcome back to another edition of One Last Game, where one never really means one. Today we have an exclusive behind-the-scenes look of the Metroid Prime 1 through 3, a Visual Retrospective art book. I absolutely love Metroid. It's probably my second or third favorite Nintendo series. I own, three of her action figures, 5 of the amiibo, and the Metroid Dread Special Edition, and more. And this Metroid Dread statue is absolutely eye-watering, not because it looks so great, but also because it will probably put me in massive amounts of debt. So let's take a look at 15 of the most interesting tidbits and notes from the official Prime Trilogy art book. Most of the notes we'll be taking a look at come from the series producer Kensuke Tanabe. Tanabe is one of the more unsung heroes of Nintendo's legendary developers. He primarily works with developers based outside of Japan who aren't part of the immediate Nintendo structure. Next Level Games, Intelligent Systems, and Retro Studios are amongst his supervision. We'll also be taking a look at each game in order, starting from Prime, ending with Corruption, and briefly with Remastered. So get your scan visors ready and enjoy brief glimpses of the art. I say brief because the ninjas have a laser pointer directed right at my head. Note 1. Though conveniently left out of the art book, Retro Studios was developing a third-person action-adventure game known as Metaforce. However, Shigeru Miyamoto suggested them to develop a Metroid game instead. At first, it was still going to be third-person, until Miyamoto suggested it go into first-person. A suggestion not taken lightly by Retro Studios, but they admit in the end he was right all along. When it came to going in and out of the morph ball, Retro suggested a skip feature to reduce morphing time. But surprisingly, Miyamoto rejected the idea. The transition animation for shifting from first-person to morph ball mode was also proposed by Retro and used almost as is. However, Retro also suggested a skip feature to reduce morphing time, but Mr. Miyamoto directed that it should be unskippable, as it was one of the few opportunities to view Samus in third person. Note 2. When developing enemies, Miyamoto taught Retro that the appearances of enemies should be designed based on functionality rather than style. That way, through design alone, players could understand enemy behavior through visual cues. Sheegoth being a perfect example with his giant unprotected weak spot on its back. With this approach, we determine gameplay mechanics and functionality instead of leading with the graphics or appearance of an enemy first, then design the enemy graphics to reflect those specifications. If we do this, players can easily intuit and understand an enemy's behavior through visual cues alone. Gameplay first. Note 3. Although Retro Studios and Nintendo are of the same, they are not cut from the same cloth. Retro Studios is based in Austin, Texas, while Nintendo is in Kyoto, Japan. Games and game creation also differed wildly between the two sides of the world, and the Prime team felt that. There were many disagreements between Retro and Nintendo simply because Retro explained, "This is how Western studios approach and think about game development." Tanabe refuted, saying, "Yes, but the game we're making is now a Nintendo game, and this is Retro's first time working on one. I've been working on Nintendo games for my entire career, so I believe I have the most experience in making Nintendo games, so please, trust me first." Retro Studios is a very talented developer, and so are many of Nintendo's other subsidiaries, but need not forget that it's the Big N who shepherds and guides these studios to make great games. Monolith Soft would be nothing without Nintendo's efforts, Next Level Games the same, and so is Retro Studios. The creation of Dark Samus was the very reason Metroid Prime became a trilogy revolving around the themes of corruption and Phazon. Without Dark Samus, the series may have ended up very differently. When the art director first showed me the storyboard for the 100% ending of Metroid Prime, he explained, "This is a scene where Metroid Prime absorbs the material from Samus' cells and regenerates." Around that time, I recall that some movies specifically announced as a trilogy from the outset were a hot topic, so I told the team, why not make it into a trilogy? Without this ending, the direction of the Metroid Prime series might have been entirely different. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes introduced Light Aether and Dark Aether. Samus must traverse both worlds to rid of the ink and the entirety of Dark Aether. Retro Studios thought of an idea where changes in one world would affect the other. Tanabe also thought of this idea way back when he was the original director of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. I felt I hadn't fully refined or explored it. As it was originally my idea, I thought it would be worthwhile to revisit it with Retro after 10 years. In the end, my impression was, this concept is still as difficult as expected. However, I believe Retro succeeded in integrating it into the game system better than we had during the development of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Echoes is often noted as the most difficult of the trilogy, many citing it as a strength of the game while others finding the difficulty too unfair and punishing. Personally speaking, Echoes is my least played of the trilogy. It's dark, bleak, hard, and oppressive. Every time I play the game, I just want to curl up into a ball and cry in a corner. But that's genuinely a compliment to the excellent atmosphere and design of the game. It seems even the developers took note of the increased difficulty, and we can all blame Tanabe for it. I had actually temporarily stepped away from development and left supervision to my team after being involved in the initial stages of Metroid Prime 2. Later, I learned that the process was challenging, so I returned in June of the release year to supervise the project. As a result, I couldn't dedicate much time to fine-tuning the difficulty. My approach to difficulty adjustment was based on the assumption that if someone like me, who isn't particularly skilled at games, could just about get through it, it would be manageable for advanced players. However, as the project progressed, my gaming skills might have inadvertently improved. Note 7. Amorbus looks like a penis. I mean, look at that. Look at the size of that thing. That thing should be censored. Okay, real note, number 7. Tanabe further reflects on Echoes' difficulty. Echoes introduces an ammo system with dark and light beams. However, many thought that ammo wasn't plentiful enough and led to longer boss fights and unfortunate deaths. The idea was that the dark beam would deal significant damage to enemies in the light world, while the light beam would be highly effective against enemies in the dark world. However, since these beams were ammo-based, we believe many players opted to conserve them and relied primarily on the power beam in combat. In fact, defeating enemies with the two special beams increased the probability of ammo drops, but this information was not conveyed to players in the game. I believe that if we had made ammo more plentiful, it would have changed the perception of battles with creatures. The Luminoth of Light Aether is at war with the Aang of Dark Aether. Retro thought of a possession mechanic for the Aang that could take over and control anything, and added a scope of variety, from corpses, space pirates, or even machines. It also served as a clever explanation for how the Aang could function in the light world, since they are inherently weak to light. This perfectly aligns with the saying by Mr. Miyamoto, "A great idea is one that solves multiple problems at once." In my opinion, the possession mechanic is a textbook example of that philosophy in action. Add that quote to the Miyamoto Hall of Fame. After Retro Studios' inclusion of the Federation Marines getting absolutely slimed in Echoes, Tanabe felt that this was an opportunity to expand the Metroid universe with world building outside of Samus. I want to shine more of a spotlight on the Galactic Federation. Even in places where Samus isn't present, they must still be battling the space pirates. The Metroid Prime series, by its nature, is more of a side story. However, precisely because of that, I started thinking, couldn't we create a title that focuses on characters other than Samus? This idea eventually came to life over 10 years later as Metroid Prime Federation for— wait a minute, are you serious? Wrong place, wrong time. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption is the final game in the prolific trilogy and ends with Samus being infected with the same thing she's been fighting against the whole time. But originally, Corruption's gameplay would have been wildly different. However, the next pitch from Retro was entirely different. It included themes such as bounty hunting and a reward system for acquiring items, with a mission-based structure aimed at shortening the overall game completion time. This was in order to mix up the gameplay after the lackluster sales of Echoes. However, those proposals were based on existing mechanics already used in other games, and thus we pointed out that they could not serve as the foundation for Metroid Prime 3. All was not lost, however, because Retro did throw up a single line at a concept meeting that wrote Samus transforming into Dark Samus. Nintendo used that as an outline for the main theme of Corruption. Something that was also conveniently left out of the art book is the other reason why this bounty hunting mechanic was never adopted, because Nintendo didn't actually know what a bounty hunter was. Despite claiming Samus to be one for 20 years, they thought of her as a motherly figure with a heart of gold, not some kind of Boba Fett. This absolutely baffled Retro, and so bounty hunting was scrapped. Hyper Mode is a mechanic where Samus utilizes her Phazon infection by delivering powerful Phazon-based attacks. The catch is that lingering too long in Hyper Mode would result in total corruption, and Samus would transform into Dark Samus. But originally, the concept we proposed involved Samus consuming a capsule containing a chemical which would immediately enhance her abilities and lower the game's difficulty. However, after the feedback from Retro that the idea of consuming a chemical isn't very elegant, we suggested a more game-oriented system, sacrificing one energy tank to temporarily power up. Even then, it was difficult to gain Retro's full approval. Hyper Mode is one of the more controversial points of corruption. It's so powerful and broken, and it makes enemy counters laughably easy. Sure, you may sacrifice an energy tank, but energy drops are so plentiful you'll just get it back anyways, and though you're under a time limit, it's not even that strict and it takes like 2 seconds to decimate enemies in normal mode. I find it interesting that this was a Nintendo design that Retro begrudgingly inserted. Metroid Prime Hunters and Metroid Prime 3 were being developed relatively around the same time. Going back to Tanabe's desire to round out the universe of Metroid, he wanted distinct bounty hunters in both games. By contrast, since the bounty hunters in Metroid Prime 3 were not playable, we gave Retro greater freedom in crafting 3 of them for the game. Gandreda, Gore, and Rundus are all very cool, but honestly they should have gotten a little bit more screen time. At least they're more well known than the guys in Hunters. Give it up for Noxus! Or Weevil! At least Sylux gets some life and love in Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. In Corruption, you'll get access to the inside of Samus's gunship with all sorts of gizmos. One of them was accessing this phone thing, which I had no idea had secret messages. When I reviewed the build, I had the idea to include a hidden code that, when entered, would allow players to hear messages from the late Mr. Iwata and Mr. Miyamoto. I still remember the day we recorded those messages in the underground studio at Nintendo's headquarters.
こんにちは、任天堂の岩田です。社長って傍から見てるとどうか分かりませんが、実際結構大変なんですよ。忙しくて大変な時にどんどんやつれていくと人は同情してくれるんですが、私は忙しいと太る方なんで、太れば太るほどなんか何も感じてないんじゃないかって誤解されてるみたいで、非常に不本意です。あ、聞こえます。宮本です。メトロイド遊んでる人たち聞こえますか？楽しいでしょう。もうね、僕もメトロイド関わり始めて何年もなりますけども、今度のは今までの中で最高でしょう。絶対最後まで遊んでみてね。じゃあね。
Metroid Prime Remastered is one of the best game remasters of all time. It perfectly translates the game and upgrades it for more modern hardware without sacrificing what made the original so great. However, Retro originally wanted to create new cutscenes for the remaster. I came to the decision to closely observe the cutscenes from the GameCube version and replicate them essentially as they were. The reason for this choice was that the cutscenes were not created solely for dramatic effect. They also played a role in conveying gameplay-relevant information to the player. It would have been cool to see new additional cutscenes, but Tanabe wanted cutscenes to exist not just for dramatic effect, but to convey gameplay info. And for that reason, I think the omission of new cutscenes is fine by me, but it's fun to imagine what they could have been. Or farming cutscenes can be great, but gameplay comes first. We've come to our final note. Let's just read the whole thing. In the fall of 2014, my team and I were reassigned away from Retro Studios' project. However, 4 years later in the spring, we were asked to take on the responsibility once again. The project presented to us at the time was Metroid Prime Remastered. This marked the rekindling of our relationship with Retro, which eventually led to our involvement in the development of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. so there's no doubt that this title was a major turning point for both Retro and myself. This tidbit reveals quite a bit. After Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze released in 2014, Retro Studios has not released a new original game in 11 years. What were they doing then? Twiddling their thumbs? Reportedly, there have been numerous cancelled projects, one being a musical RPG. But this blurb leads me to assume Metroid Prime Remastered was started in 2014, right after Tropical Freeze, and was just chugging along. We also know that the original Metroid Prime 4 was most likely started in 2017 by presumably multiple Bandai Namco studios. This isn't that illogical because Bandai Namco helped develop numerous Nintendo exclusives, most notably Super Smash Bros. While they were making the original Prime 4, Retro was making Remastered, so Nintendo was basically cheating on Retro. But as we all know, the original Prime 4 apparently sucked Amorbus balls and was canned. Nintendo then tasked Metroid Prime 4 to Retro Studios because of their rekindled connection to Metroid with Prime Remastered. Wow, what a journey. The Metroid Prime Trilogy is a testament of fun gameplay, imaginative world design, impeccable atmosphere, and just fun world building. The art in this art book further exemplifies the great work made by the talented developers at Retro Studios and Nintendo. It just goes to show how the developers are the hearts of these companies. To this day, these games are just graphical masterpieces. They hold up 20 years on and just put so many games to shame. These GameCube and Wii games look so much better than whatever the hell Pokemon is doing. It's just embarrassing. So there, have I proved to you that I love the Metroid series other than Samus's delicious booty cheeks? In this edition of the Comments Corner, we have one from Punched Pineapple in my video on the Luigi's Mansion trilogy. He states he should have gotten a spot in the Pikmin video, and there are 13 Pikmin inside of me, crawling, swarming, tearing apart, taken away. Louis has never had more fresh meat to eat. What the fuck? That's it from one last game, but it really isn't ever the last game because Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is going to be the start of a brand new chapter, 18 long years after the conclusion. Woo!